Hi, this is Fran with Stampendous, and we're continuing our watercolor series. This is lesson 111, and we're continuing to use some of our beautiful clear stamps that are the fragrant rose. And we've painted them a variety of ways, and if you haven't seen some of the earlier lessons, you can go back to those. But today we're going to continue with some fun new ways to paint beautiful roses. Here are some cards that we did, and this set has some beautiful sentiments in it as well. And I've incorporated that into some of the cards that you see here. And a very small miniature painting can become a beautiful card all by itself with just a little bit of other things added to finish off your card. So let's try some more variations. Roses can be so varied in the colors and the way the colors are when they first open to as they progress. Uh, and some of them that just really fascinate me are ones that have the striping almost to the petals. But that's even trickier to do. But you can see how the colors might be darker on the edges, or they might be darker in the center and lighter out to the edges. Here you can see an interesting range of different ways that I put some color behind the roses, and I think we'll do some more of that today because it's just a nice way to add a little bit of depth to your painting. We're using our Canson watercolor paper, 140-pound cold press. And I've cut these into panels that are mostly about 3 by 4 inches. I'm using my VersaFine black ink. And I've got my clear stamp on the handle. And we'll ink it up. Make sure we've got it inked all the way across. Get a nice impression. This ink will dry and allow us to do our watercolor work quite readily. And then I just clean up my stamp with wet wipe or other cleaners. And I've stamped a couple more that are dry and ready to go here. On this one, I decided since we're going to paint some background color that I would take my fine line masking pen, and we've shown this before. It has such a fine tip that it's actually easy to apply it to all of the little tiny like baby's breath that are in there. And I've done that ahead of time to this one, and it's drying. And be sure that when you're done, you put the wire back in and seal it up. Keeps it fresh for the next time. So it goes down white, and when it's completely dry, it will have a slight blue tint to it. So we'll let that one sit for a minute. Okay, I've moved my palette around so that you can see. This is where I do most of my mixing with the 6 primary colors. But here in the top half of my palette, I have positioned, as we mentioned before on the color wheel, the 3 cool colors are in this compartment that will give me my grays and blacks, and my 3 warm primaries are in this compartment, and that will give me a lot of the warmer brown tones. And I've turned the palette so that you can see a little bit more what's happening up here in this area. So here are my cool. This is my marine blue and rose and the yellow. And when I mix these together, I'm getting my gray tones. And it's pretty much what you see against the white of the palette. So the yellow actually neutralizes a bit here. Okay, so this is an interesting and a rather dark color. Sometimes if I want it to be a little bit more on the green side, let's see, I could simply go a little bit more between these two. And I can test on my strip, we get quite a nice dark color. Let's try this. It's darker than I've usually done, but I heat set my masking on a little bit. So let's do a wash over the top here. And I'm simply doing some rather large brush strokes, keeping in mind coming in close in behind my rose will make it really pop, and making the brush strokes themselves look kind of interesting as they fade away here. Okay. And then on this one, let's say we want to go, this one had a little bit more of a blue-gray to it, and this one had more of a green tone to it. And I'm going to revive my green, and over here I'm using my yellow and the marine blue to create more of an olive green, which I use in this part of the palette. But now if I want to gray that down, I'm going to lift some of the gray from here and add it to my green over here on this part of my palette. And let's get a good mix of it so that it's a cohesive shade of kind of a gray-green. And we're simply going to place that in, and since I didn't do the masking on the baby's breath, I just sort of work around it a little bit. But this just gives me a nice backdrop to painting in the roses. Okay, and the shape of that background area is kind of different each time. That's okay. While that's drying, we'll do a little bit more on our greens, and I'm adding a bit more yellow back into this shade of green, but it is a beautiful sort of olive color, so let's give that a try. I test that. I can see it's a little bit dark. Add a little bit more water to my brush. Okay. I think it's quite nice to get all these different shades of greens. It's going to look much more realistic than having one green out of the tube. Go a little bit lighter here so that this leaf pops out against the darker background. And if you want to lighten it, you can use your brush to lift a bit of the color as well. Give those backgrounds just a little bit of time to dry. And we'll take a closer look at these. So start studying different photos of roses, and you'll see how sometimes you'll get that beautiful edging of color just on the tips of all of the petals, and other times it's darker in the middle and the petals fade more out to the edge. So in our palette, we've got colors laid out the way we've been using them all along, and it's quite interesting sometimes just the mixes that you get in the palette between the gamboge color here and that mixed into some beautiful bits of other shades of color with the scarlet and even the rose over here. So let's mix just a little bit more of the rose, and I've replenished my paint as needed from the small tubes, and since it's very wet, I got my color very quickly there from the rose. So let's make sure we have some of the deep rose over here. And all that mix in different shades of color is quite fun. So I'm just going to make use of that as we go here. And let's see if on this one, let's start by having the deeper colors to the inside petals, and we'll lighten it uh, coming out to the edges. So now with more water and a lighter color on my brush, I'm just going to move some of that color further out onto the petals. And I'm going to pick up even some of that with my damp brush here. And let's pick up some of this in between. That's the beauty of watercolor, that things can just kind of mix and give you such an interesting range of different shades and colors. And I've been studying these beautiful roses at a neighbor's house, and as they've opened and bloomed, I've just been amazed at the variety of color and how they change between the little buds to the open and even aged blossoms. Okay, and then I might just lift a bit for highlight here and there. Okay, that's quite fun. See, never the same twice. And then this one over here, let's do, you know, I haven't done any of these roses and the more purpley colors, and some of them are quite unique and interesting, just in this shade of almost a faded purple. Get a little bit more of this blue here. Get a light wash going. And then I'm going to get a deeper shade of purple. I've got two different blues in here with the rose to give me all these different shades of purple. But now let's see if we can take this darker purple and just flood it along the edges. So have some fun observing some beautiful roses and then doing those particular colors that you see. And I almost forgot, let's see. Oh, here we go. We can remove our mask up here. And it just rolls away like rubber cement. There, and then all those little bits are really pop out against the dark background. Our Hummingbird Hello clear set has some beautiful flowers. We've got fuchsia, we've got wisteria, and these vine flowers or mandavillas can also be used for a variety of different flowers and a lot of different colors. And you can see these were some cute little square ones that will work into the Windorama die set if you want to do some fun things with that. But let's do some things where with the taped edges we can do a little bit more in the background. And so I've used, let's see here, my little cutting plate with all the grid on it is very helpful and easy way to square everything off and put masking tape around the edges. I use the grid itself to do like a 1/2 inch in between. And these panels are for a standard card size, like we talked about in our little dimensions here. And we get a good use of this many cut out of the full sheet of the watercolor paper. So one little piece of tape held the two in place, and then I just wanted to mention with the tape I can even use the grid to kind of measure out how big of a piece of just simple masking tape, but I kind of release some of the stickiness by at the beginning, so that when I press it down I can get a nice seal on the edge, but it will come up later without tearing my watercolor paper. So generally I would get everything taped first, and then I can stamp across the edges. So let's do a little bit of that. So I wanted to show you that sometimes in your stamping, things may not have a stem that connects all the way to the top, but you want to get the different heights of the flowers, and this one didn't connect at all. So we're going to show you how with our painting we're going to connect all of those branches one way or another. I'm going to start with my inside, or the phthalo blue. Squirt a little bit of water here to get a good puddle going. And what I want for my sky is going to be a light blue. Clean my brush in my swamp water, and I have fresh water in here. Okay, so I just want a lighter blue. So I'm going to start with some big wet brush strokes up here around the top. And I just want a light indication of some clouds here in the background. Okay, I intentionally did some darker blues at the top and faded away as I got further down. I want your eye to be drawn in to the hummingbirds and the flowers up here, but I think it adds a nice bit of interest just to have some clouds, and you want to think how they continue in behind and around your flowers. In this one, we were playing with a lot of colors in the backgrounds that were quite subdued, but they did make the colors of the hummingbird really pop against that color. So I'm going to proceed now with some greens, and we're going to, let's see, on this one I've got yellow with my phthalo blue, which is going to give me some brighter shades of green. And if I want more of the yellow tone for more of a lime green, keep pushing some of this back. have a place for the yellow. Okay. Then over here, the yellow with the marine blue will give me more of my olive colors. And I'm just getting a whole range of different colors of greens wet on my palette. Okay. So I'm going to start with some dark green over here. And since that's quite dark, I'm going to clean my brush and come in with some of the lighter olive colors. And then I'm going to paint more into the blues, right over the blues of the background, and give the impression of other foliage behind. And I'm just doing a very loose approach to this. But I want it dark enough up here to look as though these fuchsia blossoms aren't just dropping out of the sky, but they're connected up here to some other branches. And I'm just doing loose brush strokes. At the top, and over here, let's go with some lighter greens. So that now connects it in a really nice way. These mandevilla or vine flowers can be a lot of different colors, but some of them with the beautiful yellows are darker in the center. Hummingbirds as well have so many different shades of coloring to their beautiful feathers, and we're most familiar with the greens and blues and maybe some purples and often the ruby red throat to them. But I saw some others that were more browns in the rufous family, and others that were even more purple. And I'm just going to take artistic license here. Whoa, my rose had just been replenished from the tube, so I got a lot of rose, and I'm adding some of the blue. Let's do some purples here on our little hummingbird. We'd intended to do this particular color scheme, but since it's been sitting here and you can see the interesting variations that we've done, you now have a variety of options that you can work off of to try your own favorite combination. So there we have a couple of different variations of our beautiful hummingbirds. Now I'd like to show you how the Adventures Await set can be used to make some beautiful scenes. In this case, we're going to make sort of the look of a wintry scene, and I'll do some stamping here to get us started. We're using the VersaFine black ink. We've got the clear stamps on our blocks. The stamps can be used in a lot of different scenic combinations. You just want the larger trees in the foreground, and the hills, as you can see, can even be used upside down and right side up. They're drawn in a very simple style. So you could even stamp across the two if you planned a little bit better. I've turned my palette around so that we can see how we're going to get some grays and some blue grays. Spritzing some water up here. So these are my three cool colors, and I want to get a nice neutral gray. So the red, the marine blue, and even the yellow is going to neutralize it. Okay, so there's a bit of a purpley blue. I might intentionally get a little bit more of a lavender going up here, a bit more of the red. And then since we're going to be using a lot of our blues, I'll make sure we get some of this, the phthalo blue, get a puddle going here. Okay, so we'll get everything in view here so that you can see. And this actually is a very simple one to do. So first we want a very soft blue. Let's use our area over here to lift a little bit of that blue-gray and add some blue to it. This area is intended as a holder, but since we're using the palette flat, we don't usually make use of that. Okay, so I want to just gray down my color a little bit to look a little bit more of a wintry sky here. So let's see. Okay, that should be nice. So I'm just going to come in here across this top edge. I want to soften those hard lines a little bit. Yeah, just that little bit of change of color gives us a much more wintry sky. So we'll work our way across here. Okay, and next I had some kind of this lavender color in our mountains off in the distance. So let's test that. Okay, there's a nice, it's a muted kind of lavender. And we'll add some more of the blue to it. Okay, and then we'll go back to a light shade of the phthalo blue here. And if that looks like it needs to get toned down a little bit, we'll dip back into the gray. Okay, so now what makes this look like a winter scene is simply these little washes here of color, and I'm just creating horizontal brush strokes that come in underneath and look kind of like the shadows in the snowbanks. Okay, just some light washes. And the same over here, come in right under that bank of trees. We add just a little bit back here. Because we stamped in the dark blacks, we can easily paint across them without a problem. It almost gives me a look of a lake back in here. Maybe we'll just go with that. Okay. So now we're just painting shadows, snowbanks here. Could even do some, like a little, maybe someone has hiked through that area of the snow. The blue that I got on my open tree, a wet brush will help lift that away a little bit. Okay, then for a little bit of the dark green on these evergreens, we're going to use our yellow with the phthalo blue to get a nice dark kind of a pine green color, maybe a little bit of the olive. And I need a rather dry brush now to be able to do some detail work. Okay, so that looks good. So if I want, I could add a little bit of green here and there over the trees, but with some little tiny strokes, little vertical strokes, I'm going to add some green as if it's showing under a bunch of snow on this tree. So little tiny up and down lines is going to give us that illusion with just a couple of little brush strokes. Okay. I'm going to wet my brush and see if I can soften some of the hard edges here in the sky. It's going to look like a little bit softer there. So winter scenes can really be just that easy and quick, and it's more about the colors and the simplicity of it that makes it look all wintry. So be sure and subscribe with your YouTube account, and be sure you can catch the next series. Next week we will use these same clear stamps again and do some even more advanced watercolor techniques.